"Stay still," Clara whispered, her voice shaking as she held her baby tight. The desert night was silent, but she knew they were out there, watching, waiting. Shadows moved in the distance, torches flickering like hungry eyes. She was alone, abandoned, with nowhere to run. Then a low rumble broke the quiet, hooves on sand. A rider appeared on the ridge, his face hidden in the dark. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Who was he? A hunter ready to strike, or something else entirely? Clara's next breath might be her last, and the answer was riding closer. Clara Mason knelt in the hot sand, her hands trembling as she stared at the shallow grave. It was just a pile of dirt in the New Mexico desert, marked by a few stones, but it held her whole world. Her husband, Henry, was gone, taken by a fever that burned through him in days. Now it was just her and little Lila, her 6-month-old daughter, wrapped in a thin blanket and cradled against her chest. The sun beat down, harsh and unforgiving, as Clara whispered a quiet goodbye. Nearby, hoofbeats shuffled in the dust. She looked up to see Daniel Mason, Henry's brother, towering over her on his horse. His face was cold, his eyes sharp like a hawk's. Around him stood their hired men, rough types with weathered skin and hard stares. Daniel spat into the sand and spoke, his voice flat. "This land belongs to the Mason family," he said, "not to a useless widow." Clara's stomach twisted, but she couldn't find words to fight back. Daniel jerked his head, signaling the men. They turned their horses, ready to leave her behind. He tossed a waterskin into the dirt, half empty and leaking, like it was nothing. "That's all you get," he said. Then he smirked, a cruel little twist of his lips. "The desert will finish what Henry couldn't." Clara clutched Lila tighter as the men rode off, their shadows stretching long across the sand. She watched them disappear over the horizon, dust swirling in their wake. The air grew still, and the sun dipped lower, painting the sky red. Fear crept into her bones, cold and heavy. She was alone now, truly alone, with a baby who needed her and nothing but a few drops of water. The desert stretched out endless around her, whispering one truth. Survival wasn't promised. Not here, not for her. The sun was gone now, swallowed by the horizon, and night wrapped the desert in a heavy, dark blanket. Clara sat by Henry's grave, her knees pulled close, Lila sleeping fitfully in her arms. The air turned cold, biting at her skin through her thin dress. She rocked her daughter gently, humming a soft tune to keep the silence from pressing too hard. But then a sound cut through the quiet. A rustling, faint at first, like dry leaves skittering across the sand. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. In the distance, pinpricks of light flickered to life. Torchlight. Clara squinted, her heart starting to pound. Shadows moved against the glow, men on foot, their voices low and rough. Bandits. She had heard stories of them, scavengers who roamed these lands, picking over graves like vultures. They must have seen the fresh dirt, thought there was something worth taking. Panic surged through her. She had nothing to give, nothing but Lila, and she'd die before letting them near her baby. Clara scooped Lila up, the blanket slipping as she stumbled to her feet. The waterskin fell into the sand, forgotten. She staggered forward, her boots sinking into the soft ground, rocks catching at her ankles. The torchlight grew brighter, the voices louder, laughing now. They were coming closer. She tripped, nearly dropping Lila, and bit back a cry as her knee hit a sharp stone. Her chest heaved, her eyes darting for a place to hide, but the desert offered nothing, just endless sand and scrub. Then, out of nowhere, a hand clamped onto her arm. She gasped, twisting around, ready to scream. A man stood there, tall and silent, his face painted with streaks of red clay that glowed faintly in the dark. His eyes were steady, dark as the night itself. A Navajo warrior. He sat astride a horse, the animal so still it might have been carved from stone. He leaned down, his voice a whisper, sharp and urgent. "Follow me or die here." Clara's mind raced. She didn't know him, didn't trust him, but the shouts behind her were getting closer, the bandits' torches casting wild shadows across the sand. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The warrior, Kael, pulled her up with one strong arm, settling her behind him on the horse. She clutched Lila tight, her arms shaking as the horse took off, moving fast but quiet, hooves barely touching the ground. The wind whipped past, cold and fierce, and Clara pressed her face against Kael's back, praying the bandits wouldn't see them. They rode for what felt like forever, weaving through low hills until Kael slowed and guided the horse into a narrow crack in a rock wall. A hidden cave. Inside, the air was cool and damp. Kael slid off the horse and helped Clara down, her legs wobbling as she hit the ground. He moved quick, striking a flint to light a small pile of sticks. A fire sparked to life, its glow dancing on the rough walls. Clara sank down, cradling Lila, her breath still ragged. Kael sat across from her, pulling a small pouch from his belt. He opened it and offered her a handful of dried corn, simple and hard, but food all the same. She took it, her fingers trembling, and chewed slowly, the taste grounding her. He watched her for a moment, then spoke, his voice low and calm. "The land doesn't care who you are. It only asks if you'll listen." Clara looked up, meeting his gaze. There was no pity there, no judgment, just a quiet strength that made her feel small but not weak. She swallowed the corn, her mind spinning. Who was this man? Why had he saved her? The fire crackled between them, and outside the night stretched on, hiding dangers she couldn't face alone. For now she was safe, but something told her this was only the beginning. The next morning the cave felt too small, too dark. Clara's arms ached from holding Lila all night, and her stomach growled, empty and sharp. Kael stood at the entrance, his silhouette framed by the dawn light. He turned to her and said, "We're moving." She nodded, too tired to ask where. She followed him out, stepping into a world painted gold by the rising sun. He mounted his horse and pulled her up again, Lila nestled between them. They rode through the desert, the air warming as the hours passed, until the land dipped into a deep canyon, its walls red and towering. At the canyon's heart lay a Navajo camp, alive with quiet motion. Huts of mud and wood dotted the ground, smoke curling from small fires. People moved between them, their voices soft, their eyes curious as Kael rode in. Clara felt their stares, heavy and unsure, but Kael didn't flinch. He stopped near a hut where an older woman stood, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined but warm. This was Nita, an elder of the tribe. She looked Clara up and down, her lips tight, then spoke to Kael in a language Clara didn't know. He answered, his tone steady, and after a long pause, Nita sighed and waved them in. Kael had vouched for her, and that was enough for now. Clara stepped into the camp, clutching Lila, her legs shaky from the ride. Nita led her to a low stone by a fire and handed her a flat rock and a handful of corn. "Grind it," Nita said, her voice firm but not unkind. Clara fumbled, her hands weak, the corn slipping through her fingers. It spilled into the dirt, and her cheeks burned with shame. She'd never done this, never had to. Back home, she'd had a kitchen, a stove, a life that didn't demand this. Nita watched, then knelt beside her. She took Clara's hands, guiding them slow and sure. "Strength isn't in your hands," Nita said. "It's in your will." Clara pressed harder, the corn cracking under the stone, and for the first time she felt a flicker of pride. A boy darted past, his bare feet kicking up dust. He stopped, peering at Lila with big, bright eyes. This was Tso, 12 years old and full of life. He grinned and dropped to his knees, tickling Lila's tiny feet. She giggled, a sound so pure it caught Clara off guard. Her lips twitched, then curved into a smile, her first in weeks. Tso chattered in broken English, calling Lila little bird, and Clara's chest loosened just a bit. He ran off to fetch a stick, drawing shapes in the sand for Lila to watch, and Clara let herself breathe. Maybe this place wasn't so cold after all. Later, Kael found her by the fire, the sun high overhead. He sat beside her and pointed to the sky, where clouds drifted lazy and white. He said, "The wind tells you when a storm's coming. Feel it. Don't fight it." Clara closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush her face, and for a moment she swore she heard it whisper. He took her to a dry patch of ground and showed her how to spot water, reading the way plants leaned, the faint green in the sand. "The earth speaks if you stop shouting at it," he told her, his voice calm but deep. She nodded, soaking in every word, every lesson. Days passed, blurring into one another. Clara's hands grew calloused, her arms stronger as she ground corn beside Nita. She laughed more, watching So chase Lila around the camp, the baby's squeals filling the air. Kael's lessons sank into her bones, teaching her to see the desert not as an enemy, but as a teacher. She learned to listen, to bend instead of break. The Navajo ways were quiet, steady, rooted in something bigger than herself. For the first time since Henry's death, Clara felt a spark of hope, a sense that life could be more than just surviving. She was changing, and the canyon, with its red walls and warm fires, was starting to feel like a place she could belong. The sun was sinking low, painting the canyon walls with streaks of orange and gold. Clara sat outside Nita's hut, Lila in her lap, the baby tugging at her blanket with tiny hands. The camp hummed with its usual rhythm, women tending fires, children laughing as they chased each other through the dust. Clara felt a strange peace settle over her, a quiet she hadn't known since Henry's death. She traced a finger along Lila's cheek, smiling as the little girl cooed. For a moment the world felt soft, safe. But then So's voice broke through, sharp and urgent. "Riders!" he shouted, pointing to the horizon. Clara stood, her heart lurching as she followed his gaze. Dust clouds rolled up from the desert floor, thick and swirling, like a storm brewing fast. She squinted, and there they were, dark shapes on horseback, moving closer with every heartbeat. So darted to her side, his eyes wide. "They're coming fast," he said, his voice cracking. Kael appeared from the edge of the camp, his face hard, his hand already on the knife at his belt. The air turned heavy, the camp falling silent as everyone watched the riders approach. Clara's stomach twisted. She knew those men before she even saw their faces. Daniel Mason rode at the front, his hat pulled low, his men fanned out behind him. Their horses snorted, kicking up sand as they stopped just beyond the camp's edge. Daniel's eyes locked on Clara, cold and gleaming with something darker than anger. He leaned forward in his saddle and called out, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Hand her over, or we burn this place down." The words hit Clara like a punch, her knees trembling as she clutched Lila tighter. The men behind Daniel gripped rifles, their faces twisted with menace. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take. Kael stepped forward, his warriors falling in beside him, hands on bows and knives. The air crackled with tension, ready to snap. But Nita moved quick, her small frame pushing through the line of men. She raised a hand, her voice steady. "Blood isn't the answer," she said. "Let the land decide." Kael hesitated, his jaw tight, but he nodded, trusting her wisdom. Clara's mind spun. Why was Daniel here? He'd left her for dead, called her useless. What had changed? She looked down at Lila, the blanket bunched in her tiny fists, and then she saw it, a corner of worn paper sticking out from the folds. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. It was a map, rough and smudged, with Henry's handwriting scrawled across it. Lines marked a path through the desert, leading to a spot circled in ink. "Silver," it said. Clara's breath caught. Henry had found a silver claim before he died, a secret he'd kept even from her. He must have hidden the map in Lila's blanket, thinking it was safe. Daniel hadn't abandoned her out of spite alone. He'd tracked her down because he thought she knew, because he wanted that silver for himself. Her heart pounded as the truth sank in. This wasn't about her. It was about greed. Daniel's voice boomed again. "Last chance," he snarled, raising his rifle. Clara stumbled back, the map crumpled in her hand. The camp was her home now. These people her shield, but Daniel would destroy it all to get what he wanted. She could feel Kael's eyes on her, waiting, trusting her to decide. Her chest tightened, fear and fury warring inside her. She could give Daniel the map, let him take it, and leave, maybe spare the camp his fire. Or she could trust Kael, trust the Navajo way she'd come to know, and fight back with something stronger than guns. She looked at Nita, at the warriors ready to die for her, and then at Lila, so small, so innocent. Time slowed. She had to choose, and whatever she picked, there was no turning back. Clara stood there, the map trembling in her hand, Daniel's threat still ringing in her ears. The camp held its breath, every eye on her. She looked at Kael, his face calm but fierce, and something clicked. She couldn't let Daniel win, couldn't let him burn this place to ashes. She took a shaky step forward and whispered, "What do we do?" Kael's eyes met hers, steady as stone. He leaned close and said, "We don't fight their strength. We use their greed." His words sank in, sharp and clear, and Clara nodded, a spark of trust lighting inside her. Kael gathered the warriors quick, his voice low as he laid out the plan. Clara listened, her heart racing. They'd lured Daniel to a dry riverbed just beyond the canyon, a cracked stretch of earth that looked harmless under the moonlight. She'd pretend to trade the map, draw him in, while Kael and the others set a trap. It was risky, but it was Navajo cunning, not guns or fists, that would save them. Nita squeezed Clara's arm, her grip warm and firm, and murmured, "The land knows how to fight." Clara swallowed hard, clutching Lila, and stepped out to face Daniel. She walked to the camp's edge, the map raised high so Daniel could see it. Her voice shook, but held. "I've got what you want," she called. "Let's trade, just you and me." Daniel's eyes narrowed, greed flashing across his face. He smirked and waved his men forward, their horses stomping the ground. "Come to the riverbed," he shouted back. Clara turned, her boots crunching on the sand as she led them away, every step heavy with fear. She glanced back once, catching Kael's nod from the shadows, and kept going, Lila cradled tight against her chest. The riverbed stretched out ahead, wide and empty, its banks lined with brittle grass. Clara stopped in the middle, the map held out like bait. Daniel rode up, his men fanning out behind him, their rifles glinting in the dim light. He swung off his horse and stalked toward her, his hand outstretched. "Give it here," he growled. Clara hesitated, her fingers tight on the paper, then tossed it at his feet. He lunged for it, laughing low, but as he bent down, a rumble started, faint at first, like thunder rolling far off. His head snapped up, confusion twisting his face. Upstream, Kael and the warriors moved fast. They'd climbed the canyon walls earlier, silent as ghosts, to a hidden dam of rocks and mud, built long ago to catch rain. Now they struck it hard, axes and hands tearing it apart. Water roared free, a wall of churning brown, rushing down the riverbed, with a sound like the earth itself waking up. Clara heard it coming, and ran, scooping Lila, and diving for higher ground. Daniel shouted, his men scrambling, but it was too late. The flood hit, fast and merciless, swallowing horses, rifles, everything in its path. Daniel clawed at the bank, his screams lost in the roar until the water pulled him under, his greed dragging him down. Clara clung to a rock, Lila wailing in her arms as the torrent swept past. The riverbed churned for minutes, then slowed, leaving nothing but mud and silence. She stared, her breath ragged, hardly believing it was over. Kael appeared beside her, his face streaked with sweat, his eyes calm. He helped her stand and said, "The earth protects those who respect it." Clara looked out at the wreckage, Daniel and his men gone, taken by the land they'd tried to conquer. Her knees buckled, but Kael's hand steadied her. The trap had worked, not with blood, but with wisdom, a lesson carved deep into the desert itself. The night settled over the canyon, cool and quiet after the chaos. The Navajo camp came alive with celebration, a fire blazing high in the center, its light dancing on the red walls. Drums beat a steady rhythm, and voices rose in song, soft but strong. Clara stood near the edge, holding Lila close, watching the people move in a circle, their shadows swaying with the flames. Relief washed over her, warm and heavy, loosening the knot in her chest. They'd survived, not just her and Lila, but all of them together. Nita approached, her steps slow but sure, a woven bracelet in her hands. She took Clara's wrist and slipped it on, the threads rough but beautiful. "You're not one of us by blood," she said, her voice gentle, but by heart. Clara's throat tightened, her eyes stinging as she looked down at the gift. Before she could speak, Tso bounded over, his grin wide and bright. He scooped Lila from her arms and spun her around, calling out, "Little sister!" Lila squealed, her tiny hands reaching for him, and Clara laughed, a sound that broke free with tears trailing down her cheeks. She wiped her face and glanced across the fire. Kael stood apart, his figure still against the flickering light, watching the celebration with quiet eyes. Clara handed Lila to Tso and walked over, her boots soft on the sand. She stopped beside him and asked, her voice low, "Why did you save me that night?" Kael didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames, then spoke, his words careful. "I saw my sister in you, lost to sickness years ago. I couldn't walk away again." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of his pain, a shadow he'd carried alone, until now. The drums faded, and the camp grew still. Clara looked around, at Nita tending the fire, at Tso playing with Lila, at the faces that had become familiar, kind. She'd lost everything once, her husband, her home, but here, in this canyon, she'd found something new. She made her choice then, simple and sure. She'd stay, raise Lila among the Navajo, let this place be their family. The sky lightened, dawn creeping over the horizon, and Clara stepped forward, holding Lila tight. She gazed at the sunrise, its glow warm on her face, and whispered, "We're home."